Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of The Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 11th of April. So coming to the first article, trickeries of the money bill. Now the context here is a case, that is the Revenue Bar Association versus the Union of India case. This case at present is what is being heard by the Supreme Court. Oral hearings on this particular case is what the Supreme Court has heard. Several important issues are what are being delved into in this particular case, and that is what has been discussed in this particular editorial. So coming to these issues which have been discussed, the first issue is with regards to the Finance Act of the year 2017. It is this particular act which has been discussed or which is being referred to in this particular case. So this is something that you should know in the backdrop aspect. Now, first and foremost, about any finance act, you should know that this is an act that is passed annually, and this seeks to give effect to the government's fiscal policy. Once the budget is passed, that budget is translated into an act, which is the Finance Act of that particular year, and it is passed by the Parliament. But what happened in the Finance Act of the year 2017 is that instead of only focusing on the fiscal policies of the government, some other changes were also what were brought about in this particular act. This act toppled the existing regime that was governing the working of 26 judicial bodies in this country, that is the judicial tribunals in the country. It changed or it tampered or it affected the functioning of these tribunals. It changed the way of appointment in these tribunals. So these are some changes that have been brought about by this act, and that is what has been challenged in this particular case. Now coming to the changes that have been brought about. Now here you should know that until now these tribunals were what were being guided, or they were working on individual statutes. That means each of them had their individual law. But the act has changed that, and now it has given the central government absolute power to make rules as well as to govern the operation of these tribunals, especially vis-a-vis the appointment of the members of this tribunal. So these are the changes that have been brought about by this particular act, and this is what has been challenged. Next, you should know that the editorial is discussing something about the legislative versus executive. Now here you all, I'm sure by now you all must have heard a term something like delegation of power. Delegation of power happens whenever the legislature feels that it is overburdened. Some of its power, some of its lawmaking powers is what it delegates to the executive. But this is something that is a practice for long in the Indian Parliament or in the Indian legislative, and it is something that is acceptable also. But the editorial here is discussing that in this particular case, what has happened is that first and foremost, this delegation of power is what has been done in a wrongful manner, which is through the Finance Act. And also this delegation of power is what is relating to a major issue, which is the functioning of these judicial tribunals. And this is something that cannot be accepted. Here are some examples of tribunals is what has been given. Here you should know that these tribunals are very, very important. For example, it includes the National Green Tribunal, the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. So these are some major tribunals which have been discussed about, or changes in whom have been brought about. So if these tribunals are what are important, then delegation of powers to the central government is unacceptable, because these tribunals are performing functions of the judiciary is what has been analyzed in this editorial. So when the functions are what are being performed of that of the judiciary, then how can the executive take decisions is what is the entire analysis here. So that is something that has been discussed. Next, the editorial is discussing something about Dr. Ambedkar's fears. Now, if you all know that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is the father of India's constitution, and at the time of making of the constitution, Dr. Ambedkar had raised some fears. He had said that the democratic model in India is a top-down model rather than a bottom-up model. Why is it not a bottom-up model? Which means that it is not coming from the people of India. This is primarily because the society at that point of time had been ruled for 200 years by the British government. Also, the other part of India was what was the princely states. So India did not have an idea, the society did not have an idea of what is democracy. So this was an idea which was pushed on the society from the constitution. It was derived from the constitution. So Dr. Ambedkar feared that because it is not coming from the society and it is a top-down model, this model is what is very, very fragile. And for this model to sustain, it is important that the regulations in the constitution be carried out. The division of power that the constitution envisages between the legislative, executive and the judiciary is what is maintained. So here the editorial is discussing that in this particular case, it is this balance which is being distorted. And if this balance is being distorted, then these fears of Dr. Ambedkar are what can be realized in this era. So that is what has been the entire analysis here. The next issue that is important is with regards to the money bill, and this is the most important issue of this particular editorial. Now here you should know that the money bill is mentioned in the Constitution under Article 110. So this is one thing that first and foremost you should understand and you should remember about the money bill. Also in the Article 110 Section 1 is what mentions about is a list of all the areas which are to be included in the money bill. For instance, subjects such as the imposition and abolition of taxes, expenditures which are charged out of the Consolidated Fund of India are what are to be included in the money bill. Otherwise, areas other than these are not to be included in the money bill. But what is happening here is that this limited scope of the money bill is being exploited by the government. Anything which is implicitly or explicitly far away related to the money bill is also being included in the money bill. This is largely done to do away with the role of the Rajya Sabha. As you all know, money bill is what is to be passed only by the Lok Sabha, and an approval or a passing by the Rajya Sabha is what is not required in the case of the money bill. So the government, to do away with the role of Rajya Sabha, is passing everything as money bill, is what has been criticized here. Now another important analysis about which you should have some idea here is that what was the idea behind money bill in the Constitution. Now the idea here was that whenever a government is coming to power, it is what has been elected by the popular vote. So the functioning of the government vis-a-vis financial matters is what should not be restricted. If the government does not have a majority in the Rajya Sabha, its functioning on fiscal decisions is what should not be impeded. So the constitution makers had come up with this idea of money bill, that on financial matters the government will not have to go to the Rajya Sabha. But this did not mean that the constitution makers consider Rajya Sabha inferior or less important. So that was not the entire intention behind the money bill, but this is what is now being misused, is what has been discussed here. The next issue which has been discussed here is the role of the speaker. Now here you all know that this decision as to whether or not a bill is a money bill is what is taken by the speaker. And under Article 110(3), it is mentioned that this decision is what is final. So the government in its defense is saying that this decision by the speaker is beyond judicial review, because the Article 110(3) says that this is what is final decision of the speaker. But the courts now have said that this is not the case. It is very much under the ambit of judicial review. And this finality that has been given to the speaker, this article is largely limited to the parliament. That is, in the premises of the legislative or in the premises of the parliament, the decision of the speaker is what is final, but it does not mean that this is out of judicial review. So that is something that you should know. Next, what you should know is the role of the Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha ensures adequate checks on the actions of the legislative. It prevents any populist decision being taken. So the role of Rajya Sabha is very, very important, and this kind of steps by the government undermines the role of the Rajya Sabha and its importance. So that is something that you should know. Next is the role of the Supreme Court. Now this matter being with the Supreme Court, the editorial is discussing that in the past also Supreme Court has had several opportunities to curb such kind of tendencies or exploitation of the money bill by the government. For example, in the Aadhaar case also the Supreme matter went to the Supreme Court. But there the Supreme Court missed this opportunity and it did not bring out this check on the government, which even passed an act as important as the Aadhaar Act and as a money bill. So now it is an opportunity for the Supreme Court to redeem itself. It is an opportunity for the Supreme Court to decide that it should make or it should ensure a check on such kind of tendencies by the government where it is undermining the role of the Rajya Sabha, it is misusing the role of the speaker, and it is misusing the idea of money bill. So this is the entire analysis of this particular article. Indeed, as I'm sure you all can analyze by now yourself also, that the article is very, very important for General Studies paper 2. So that is what is the relevance of this particular article. Coming to the next article, for forcing China's hand. Now the context here is that of USA versus China on listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. Some new developments in this regard have been taken place. So this article is what is analyzing these developments. So coming to the issues which are important. First and foremost is USA's new front. Now here you should know that USA has opened up a new front where a resolution is what has been passed by US. A resolution is what has been forwarded by US to 15 nations of the United Nations Security Council to blacklist Masood Azhar and to subject him to a travel ban, assets freeze and an arms embargo. So this is what has been envisaged by US under this particular resolution, and this has been done by US despite knowing that China is the only country which is blocking such kind of listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. You should know that amongst the 15 countries in the UNSC, 14 have been agreeing on bringing Masood Azhar, but it is China which is waiting, and this is also which is a concern for India. So as a result of which this editorial becomes important for us. Next, what you should know is the role of France. Now, France has also advocated a proposal for that matter, which to list Azhar, and this has been done under 1267 Sanctions Committee of the UNSC. So this is something that you should remember vis-a-vis France, that it has passed this proposal under the 1267 Sanctions Committee of the United Nations Security Council. So whenever you are discussing the Pulwama attack or any issue vis-a-vis Masood Azhar, please try and bring out the role played by US as well as France, because this is a role that is in the favor of India. Next, you should know about China, which I have repeated in previous articles also, that China has been continuously blocking the listing of Masood Azhar. This is largely an obligation that China is fulfilling towards Pakistan. In the last decade, 4 times China has blocked the listing of Masood Azhar. So that is something that has been repeated here. Next is the issue of Pulwama attack. Now, in the aftermath of the Pulwama attack, the Jaish-e-Mohammed took the responsibility of the attack, and India upsurged its demands for listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. Also, India pushed with its diplomatic outreach, and it is because of this that major countries like the US as well as France have been favoring the listing of Masood Azhar. So that is what has been analyzed. Next, which is something that is very, very important, is the changing scenario in South Asia. Now, the editorial here is discussing that for long India was somehow silent on matters of such kind of attacks by Pakistan, but now India has gone ahead. It has taken the fight to actually Pakistan's territory. In the aftermath of the Pulwama attack and the Balakot airstrikes, India has well entered into Pakistan's territory. And this is what is showing that there is a change scenario in South Asia. The India-Pakistan crisis is what has now risen to a newer level, and in the future, if such kind of an insinuation or such kind of a stimulus is what is given to India, then India is going to reciprocate in a more tougher stand. Also, what becomes important here is that China is rising in power, and India is now playing a critical role in curbing the influence of China in South Asia. And this is what is in USA's interest. To curb China's influence in South Asia, US wants India to play a major role. So that is the entire geopolitics that has been analyzed here. So the impact of Pulwama attack on South Asia is what is going to be an important topic for international relations, and also the role of US as well as France is something that is important for us. So that is the relevance and importance of this particular article. Coming to the next article, the Dantewada ambush. Now the context here is the recent deadly attack which has been done by the Maoists in Dantewada district of Chhattisgarh. Now you should know that in this particular attack, it has killed Bhima Mandavi, who was a BJP MLA, and 4 security personnel. So this is what this attack has been all about. Indeed, this is a ghastly attack. It is a deadly attack. Now, the issues that are important, the first issue is that of disrupting the electoral process. Now, the intention of this particular attack, the timing is clearly to disrupt the electoral process. So, the need of the hour is to ensure that polling is what takes place without the fear of violence. Reassuring the citizens in this particular region is what is the responsibility of the government. So, that is one issue. The second issue is that of the resurging ability. Now, here you should know that in the past, several steps have been taken to curb Maoists, and these steps have been taken successfully. A lot of their ability is what has been suppressed by the government, but this attack clearly proves to us that the Maoists still have the resurging ability, and any time they can make a targeted attack is what has been shown and proven here. Next is the issue of the issue is that of the standing operating procedures as well as intelligence. Now, whenever such kind of attacks take place, questions are what are raised on the standing operating procedures and the intelligence capabilities of the security forces. There are clear revelations of lapses here. For instance, in this particular case, the MLA had refused to take additional security which he was entitled to. So it was a shift from the standing operating procedure. Also, the intelligence capabilities is something that is questionable, that how did the Maoists get the information or intelligence of the movement of the MLA is what is being questioned here. Next, what has been analyzed is the role of civil administration and state police. Now, what has happened in these kind of regions which are under Maoist attacks is the large amount of security is what has gone to the paramilitary forces. and this is what ignored the civil administration and the state police. So what has been called off in this particular article is that it is important that strengthening of civil administration is done, and also improvement and modernization of the state police is what is done, so that these kind of attacks are what can be checked upon. So that is something that is important and what has been analyzed. Also, there is a need for some social measures here. This requires addressing the people's aspirations and concern, especially about exploitation and alienation from their lands in the face of extractive policies in their resource-rich habitat. So this is something that needs to be done, and this is something that needs to be done on a war footing is what has been advocated. The Maoist ideology is, the editorial is saying that the Maoist ideology is what is long dead, but the government interference of the government steps are what are required for socio-economic development of this region are what are not happening at the pace that is required. So this is what needs to be done to ensure that these kind of attacks or Maoist violence in India is completely done away with. So that is what is the entire analysis here. The topic in this event is what is an important example in internal security aspect of the general studies mains paper. So that is what is the relevance of this particular article. And that's all for today. But before we finish, please take a look at our programs. We are starting with an IAS prelims revision batch from the 20th of April. We are starting with a regular batch from the 15th of April. And also we have a Karnataka administrative ongoing batch for which we are allowing admission. So all those of you who are interested, please do get in touch with us. So that's all for today. I thank you all for watching the video.